everyone. Good morning to you all from Pune. Um, Today we join Dr. Amar Krishna, Major General Dr. Amar Krishna, in the Brainwave series for his session on leadership in the pandemic times. Nothing great will be achieved without great men, and men are only great if they are determined to do so. With this quote, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to first thank for all the guidance from our Honorable Chancellor, Sir, Dr. P.D. Patil, Sir, Dr. Mrs. Bhagyashree Patil, Ma'am, and our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Dr. N.J. Pawar, Sir. Dr. D.Y. Patil Vidyapeeth has developed into a magnificent organization, and it is their vision, it is the vision and philanthropy of Dr. P.D. Patil, Sir, that inspires us to bring you all such quality education. And we continue to strive to do more for you guys, and that's how we bring the Brainwave series for you. Our Honorable Trustee and the Executive Director, Dr. Mrs. Smita Zadav, has always been the source of motivation since she is herself a very dynamic personality and a go-getter. And we would like to see you guys develop into one as well. So with this, I'd like to invite upon Dr. Safia ma'am to actually give the welcome address.
Morning to all of you. It gives me an immense pleasure to extend to you all a very warm greetings. It is my honor and privilege to welcome you all on the behalf of Dr. D.Y. Patil University Center for Online Learning. Dr. D.Y. Patil University Center for Online Learning has opted for transforming the challenge of the current situation and introduced DPU Brainwave series, which features conversation with thought leaders, industry experts, and change makers from across the world, which has helped students in learning new challenges during the current scenario and develop oneself into a new warrior. And today we have our honorable guest, respected retired Major General Amar Krishna sir, who will enlighten us with his knowledge and experience. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and gracing this webinar. I am really thankful to you, sir.
Thank you so much for those words, ma'am. I would now like to invite Dr. Yogesh Zodare to introduce the guest for the day.
Thank you, Sohail, sir. Good morning, all. It's my great privilege to introduce Major General Dr. Amar Krishna, sir. The Major General Dr. Amar Krishna, sir, who is a general officer who has had 37 years rich experience of active services in Corps of Engineer in the Indian Army, a graduate of the National Defence Academy, Pune, and also a Defence Services Staff College. Wellington, he has served in counter-insurgency, high altitude and line of control border areas. He has commanded an armed engineer regiment in operations. He has also been a United Nations peacekeeper in Africa. He has held many prestigious command, staff, and instructional appointments. As a chief engineer, he has been instrumental in the construction of state-of-the-art infrastructure for the defense services. In the rank of Major General, he has been responsible for the administration and logistics of the Eastern and Southern theaters. He has also completed his PhD in management studies after his retirement from the Army in 2015. He has been sharing his vast experience and teaching MBA students in leadership, strategic management, operation, and supply chain management, and also a number of other subjects. A keen sportsman and also who has excelled in tennis, squash, sailing, and is presently an avid golfer. So we have such a great person to conduct a webinar on this important issue. So I welcome Major General Dr. Amar Krishna sir to deliver his webinar. Sir, you are heartily welcome to this session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Before I start, Dr. D.Y. Patil Vidyapeeth Pune has achieved the 19th rank in the medical category of medical institutions, a second rank in the category of dental colleges, and the 49th rank among the universities in India. The Vidyapeeth is also declared as a Category 1 university by the University Grants Commission under its graded autonomy regulations. The online MBA program has been carefully designed in order to impart the necessary basic leadership and managerial skills and bridge the gap between expectations of industry and the actual attainment by students. I'm thankful to our Honorable Chancellor, Dr. P.D. Patil, sir, Vice Chancellor, Dr. N.J. Pawar, sir, our Executive Director, Dr. Smita Jadhav, Madam, and Dr. Safia Farooqui, Director of D.Y. Patil, of Dr. D.Y. Patil University Center of Learning, for giving me this opportunity to speak on this current and extremely relevant subject of leadership in turbulent times with respect to the COVID pandemic. Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to my presentation. Today, the topic is leadership in turbulent times with respect to the COVID pandemic that we're all going through. Leadership during COVID-19 crisis. Leadership of any organization is itself a very challenging job. And with the pandemic now, it becomes all the more difficult. The pandemic of COVID-19 broke the world in 6 months, starting from 11 January last year, when China first declared its first COVID death, going on through these 6 months up to June end, where it spread so fast and crossed the grim milestone of more than 10 million confirmed cases and nearly 5 lakh deaths the world over. It just showed how fast the pandemic was spreading. And even now, it is not showing too many signs of abating. In today's date, the total coronavirus cases in the world are totaling this large figure, as well as the deaths have also crossed 46 lakhs 6,000 the world over. And it has affected 221 countries the world over. There is no precedent in living memory for the challenge that COVID-19 now poses to communities and world leaders. This has been said by Mr. Ban Ki-moon, who has been the Secretary General earlier. And some typical sentiments of leaders during this pandemic. The situation seems dangerous and is still uncertain. My leadership team is not aligned on what we need to do. The impact on our profit and loss looks to be significant, and the longer term implications are hard for me to forecast. Another one, headquarters doesn't seem to realize the severity of what I am dealing with. These are the general sentiments of the leaders and managers during this time, and such sentiments have been voiced earlier in the previous major crisis, the 1997 Asian financial crisis, the 2003 SARS crisis, and also the 2008 global financial crisis. Catastrophes of this magnitude test leaders on their ability to manage through these uncertainties and finally come out stronger. So we shall see this about leadership in these difficult times. What is the situation? The pandemic has emerged as an unprecedented international crisis. It is a state of VUCA, implying volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And such situations need rapid, high impact decisions marked by limited or even at times no information, or worse, confusing information. Leaders have to manage this VUCA state, learn new lessons, develop creative problem-solving strategies to ensure that their enterprises are operational and their employees are well cared for and looked after and kept safe. What has been the response? As I've said, for business leaders, it is already very difficult to anticipate what's going to happen in the future. But now with this pandemic, this seems almost impossible, because plans need to change at a moment's notice. For example, work from home, people had to adopt to this remote work environment almost overnight. And during such times of uncertainty, it's natural for leaders to experience anxiety and fear. It has also thrown up some advantages. It has provided opportunities for leaders to demonstrate empathy, put people first, connect with them, and bring out the best of themselves. Restoring control also keeps these leaders on the positive path. The pandemic has also emphasized the importance of strong leaders who know how to face adversity and steer their organizations away from trouble. Leaders are now better aware of being prepared to empower their teams and cater for their people during such conditions. So how does one respond effectively to such a crisis? First, finding out what's happening, and it's very difficult in a confusing environment, especially in the first 6 months of COVID, one did not know what's happening. So find out what's happening, face the crisis squarely, get into it, don't deny it, as we shall see as we go along. Be vigilant, find out how it is progressing and what are the new things that are coming up. Prioritize what needs to be done and in what priority, and know what you can control and what you may probably cannot control. Leadership lies at the crux of any organization, be it a small enterprise, a large business empire, or even a nation. Leadership can either lead to success or failure. I shall now discuss a few presidents and prime ministers who mishandled the situation. Many countries around the world responded to this pandemic with tragically inadequate policies. The worst pandemic leaders are those handful who chose total denialism and ineffective action. We shall see them. A combination of factors contributed to prolonged extreme COVID outbreaks in their countries. And inadequate national leadership is one of the important factors amongst these. First, the president of Brazil, Jair Bolsonaro, he failed to respond to COVID-19, called it little flu, and actively worsened the crisis in his country. Used his constitutional powers, interfered with his health ministry's matters such as clinical protocols, data disclosure, as well as vaccine procurement. He vetoed legislation mandating the use of masks, obstructed state governments to promote social distancing, and used his executive powers, allowing many businesses to remain open, terming them as essential, even such issues as spas and gyms. He aggressively promoted unproven medicines, for example, hydroxychloroquine. And misrepresenting science, he blamed the Brazilian state governments, China, and the World Health Organization for the crisis in his country, never taking responsibility on himself for managing his own country's outbreak. In December last, he said that he would not take the vaccine because of side effects. And he's quoted as having said, if you turn into a problem, it's your problem. Quite ridiculous. Pandemic mismanagement had led Brazil to change 4 health ministers in less than a year. And Brazil's uncontrolled outbreak gave rise to several new coronavirus variants. Next, the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko. He has been in denialism since the beginning. He never acknowledged the threat of COVID. While other countries were enforcing lockdowns, he opted not to implement such restrictive measures. Instead, he said the virus can be prevented by drinking vodka, visiting saunas, and working in the field. He was diagnosed positive, though asymptomatic, but continued insisting that the virus was not a serious threat and was also seen visiting COVID hospitals without a mask, as shown above, as he thought that it supported his desired image of being a strong man. He still says that he won't get vaccinated. Prime Minister of India, Mr. Narendra Modi. In the first phase, the nationwide lockdown, the plight of the migrant workers was not thought of carefully and also not implemented effectively. Also, the adverse effect that the lockdown had on the national economy, drastic effects. Also, the second wave in April, May this year, where we had nearly 4 lakh cases per day and patients dying in hospitals for non-availability of oxygen and also life-saving medicines. And there were also no vacant beds available in hospitals. And before that, in January, he had declared, more or less boasted, that India had saved humanity by containing corona. And in March, the Union Health Minister has also gone on record as saying the pandemic is reaching an end game. This is the end of the pandemic. The actual situation was the pandemic or the COVID situation was gaining strength in India and worldwide. The government appeared to be not prepared for contingencies, also the emergence of deadlier variants. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his BJP leaders held large election campaign rallies, and in such campaigns, few of them only wore of the public wore masks. The government also allowed a mega religious congregation, the Kumbh at Haridwar, from January to March. Probably these were also can be regarded as super spreader events. And the government also allowed 10 million vaccine doses to be sent to other countries, which resulted in a shortage for our own citizens. These are some images of the plight of migrant labor, which was probably not thought out and executed well, and led to a massive exodus to their villages and again back once the situation improved, a very pathetic condition. And in the second wave, India is running out of oxygen. COVID patients are dying. The government appeared to be not prepared. People had to manage more or less themselves. Appeared as the citizens were left to fend for themselves. Then we have President of Mexico, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador. Mexico has been having the highest case fatality rate in the world, at par with US and India, though these two other countries have a much larger population. Throughout, he has sought to minimize the gravity of the situation and restricted calls for lockdown, continued holding nationwide rallies, and frequently refused to wear the mask. He only slightly increased the health-related expenditures during the pandemic, which itself was very insufficient. His continued policy on extreme fiscal austerity, which he started in 2018, made tackling the crisis much more difficult by limiting financial aid to citizens and businesses. This in turn aggravated the economic shock caused by the pandemic, necessitating the need to keep the economy open all through last year, well into the ferocious second wave towards the end of last year. We also have the then President of the United States, Mr. Donald Trump. Trump's early denial of the pandemic, active propagation of misinformation about mask wearing, anti-science rhetoric, and incoherent leadership harmed the country as a whole. He's on record as calling the virus Kung Flu virus or the Chinese virus. Stopped US funding of the World Health Organization. And he's also on record for proposing unorthodox treatments to treat this pandemic, to treat this virus. He's been quoted as saying, hit the body with a tremendous light, ultraviolet or just a very powerful light. Supposing you brought the light inside the body, either through the skin or in some other way. I also see the disinfectant wave, knocks it out in a minute. And is there any way we can do that by injection? As it gets in the lungs and does a tremendous job. Go out in the sun, have heat, which has an effect on the virus. And such attitudes made USA cross another grim milestone of 6 lakhs deaths in June 21. We've also heard about the 2020 Ig Nobel Prize winners. Ig Nobel, for those who may not be too aware of it, are the opposite of good work done for which the people are given the Nobel Prize. So in 2020, the prize for medical education has gone to the leaders of these countries which I mentioned: Brazil, Belarus, India, Mexico, USA, UK, Turkey, Russia, Turkmenistan, for using the COVID-19 pandemic to teach the world that politicians can have a more immediate effect on life and death than scientists and doctors can. It's very important for leaders. It has highlighted the importance of good and effective leadership, especially during these difficult times. There are 4 ingredients in true leadership: brains, soul, heart, and good nerves. This has been said by the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. So we can see amongst the last 4 or 5 that I've discussed what was what. There have also been successful and effective leaders. I will be discussing one of them, Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand. On leadership, she has been quoted to have said, "To me, leadership is not about necessarily being the loudest in the room, but instead being the bridge or the thing that is missing in the discussion and trying to build a consensus from there." She and her team understood the threat, launched a successful crisis strategy, prevented the rapid spread of the virus, resulting in the lowest mortality rate of only 4 in a million in the world. How did they achieve this? They very clearly defined their priorities based on scientific advice, shifted from the stage, a lower stage of mitigating the problem to eliminating it. That was the highest stage 4. This helped people understand the current level of risk and the restriction that they must follow. They also prepared hospitals for the influx of patients, carried out the normal 14-day quarantine for incoming travelers, and also imposed closed their borders completely. They communicated effectively, communicating directly through Facebook Live. She clearly and empathetically came across as competent and caring. She acknowledged the social and economic disruptions everyone would face during the lockdown. And she addressed challenges like people being separated from their loved ones, unable to attend funerals, and displayed a clear understanding of what she was asking for people to do. They appointed and empowered decision makers. They appointed health experts to cultivate public trust through their knowledge and expertise. Dr. Bloomfield and Dr. Wiles were two of these who were helping by demystifying science for the New Zealand citizens, and they were the go-to experts for reliable answers to all the questions that the public may have about the virus. They also took action according to the changing situation. On March 26 last year, they raised the level to the highest alert level 4 of elimination. As the situation improved, in about 6 weeks, they brought it down to alert level 3. And another 6 to 7 weeks, they brought it down to alert level 1 as the situation improved further. Therefore, she took bold action when required, was also flexible enough to change decisions as per the situation. They also helped in meeting the needs of the people, and to overcome the adverse economic effect, the government offered interest-free loans that deferred the mortgage payments, as also rent support and other issues. A new tax reform of the tune to $1.8 billion was brought in to support companies and the employees who had been laid off. Government ministers and other public service chief executives also voluntarily took a 20% pay cut. In crisis, strong leadership skills make all the difference. The pandemic has again highlighted the value of effective leadership. Leaders across industries and sectors have risen to the dual challenge of the pandemic, managing the pandemic, the health issues, as also the economic crisis in a very impressive fashion. Many chief executive officers led their organizations quickly to change in response to the emerging needs. For example, by retooling to produce suddenly in-demand items such as hand sanitizers and personal protective equipment, PPEs. Leaders in organizations manage their teams shift from in-person to full-time remote work practically overnight, as we have seen and we have experienced. It's not just what leaders do, but how they do it that matters. Act decisively, think strategically, communicate effectively. These have always been fundamental to leadership and will always remain. But the disruption caused by the pandemic made it clear that just these skills are not enough. Jacinda Ardern won praise for both her swift and decisive response, and more importantly, her empathy, honesty, and down-to-earth style, saying, you can be both empathetic and strong at the same time. In response to polls that show her as New Zealand's most popular leader in a century, Arden has said it speaks of the work we have jointly done. I just happen to have had the humble and privileged opportunity to be leading at this time. Just a minute. Sorry. Similar sentiments have been expressed by the Secretary General of United Nations, that we are in this together and we will together go through this. We will get through this together. Coming on to the principles of leadership in a crisis: communication, decision-making, humanism, innovation, realism, core values. We shall just quickly see these in little more detail as to how they pertain to this pandemic. Communication. Quantity or quality of communication from a leader has a serious impact. Uncertainty produces anxiety. A leader's silence is often interpreted as weakness and an inability to measure up to the situation. We in India have experienced this to a certain extent during the time when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister of India. His silence very often got interpreted as weakness, which the opposition made good use of. It is essential to communicate on what is happening and what it means for the organization. Communication needs to be clear, consistent, and adaptive as per the changing situation. Decision-making in the setting of ambiguity. Successful leaders see through the clutter of conflicting data and opinions of the crisis. They identify areas that need attention. They allocate effort and resources accordingly. They quickly decide on the path forward, providing a sense of direction. Crises are often fluid. Leaders need to be flexible and agile to adapt to these changing circumstances, adopting new and novel ideas. They need to encourage out-of-the-box thinking to help deal with such catastrophic events. Leaders also need to engage with purpose and humility, engaging purposefully with others to harness the energy and thought process of a wider workforce. They get more ideas. Connecting with colleagues shows that one generally cares about them and their welfare. Purposeful engagement emphasizes the power of respectful dialogue and connection over correction. A crisis is not the time to dwell on mistakes. Rather, it is to instill in confidence in team members through empathy, support, and reassurance. Having a realistic view of the current state with optimism for the future. Communicating credibly to see if people have sufficient resources needed to meet the threats, both material, that is having the PPEs, especially for those who are working in hospitals and clinics, as well as infrastructure to work from home, which everybody did not have initially, as well as psychological, that is such as determination, solidarity, positivity, and such. They communicate the gravity of the challenge transparently and are humble to admit that they do not have all answers. It strengthens their credibility and they are able to share an optimistic vision, which is both reassuring and realistic. Leaders plan for both the long and short term. Successful leaders devote short-term resources to urgent needs while also maintaining focus on the long-term goals, strategic goals. They do not hesitate to make hard choices such as work from home, social distancing, freezing new hiring, canceling elective medical procedures, and even enforcing strict lockdowns. They demonstrate courage and foresight and continue investments essential to organizational long-term health. In uncertainty, some leaders are guided by concerns of just optics, that is media coverage of their decisions, while other strong leaders are guided by the view of sacrifices required to ensure strategic direction. Flattening the leadership structure. Organizations need many leaders in times of rapid and unpredictable change. In a crisis, senior executives have a tendency to assume and assert control, stripping away leadership responsibilities from the subordinates in an effort to reduce risk and increase efficiency. The resultant weakening of the team's leadership skills has long-term ill effects. Strong leaders who enable others to lead and act as catalysts for widespread change enable what we call horizontal or agile leadership. Focus on mission and core values. The crisis is an opportune time to rediscover one's core values. Mission and core values of organizations are put to test in such turbulent times. Effective leaders have this opportunity or make use of this opportunity to re-emphasize these values to motivate and galvanize their workforce. It is also important to recognize and applaud champions, volunteers, frontline clinical workers, especially those working in the intensive care units or hospitals, other emergency responders, to set a visible example to the public. Leaders need to look outwards. The best leaders actively resist the instinct of withdrawing inwards. They look outwards to colleagues, gathering inputs required to enable better decision making. In February, March last year, leaders of many grocery chains the world over contacted leaders of similar retailers elsewhere in the world to understand the effects of the local lockdowns there to ensure continuous and effective operations. Crisis also breeds opportunity. It is important for a leader in the post-crisis phase to carry out a rapid assessment of the situation and to identify lessons learned. How did we do? What did we do well? What did we not handle well? Are critical questions that guide the rebuilding process. A progressive leader will identify new paradigms and opportunities that present themselves as a result of such a crisis. They use this opportunity to incorporate innovative strategies into the rebuilding process so that the new product is stronger, more robust, and progressive. The instinct of returning to normal may not be the best choice of philosophy. Crises generate a burning platform, an opportunity to drive for transformational change, overall change for the better. COVID-19 may just be known in later years as the event that tipped medicine and education into the digital era. COVID-19 leadership in a crisis. To two ends of the spectrum. On the left is the task and ideas more related to operations. On the right is relationships and behaviors that is more related to connecting with people. And three issues: be courageous, be curious, be clear. Be courageous, embrace uncertainty as far as operations are concerned. Distribute leadership and decisions as far as connecting with people is concerned. Be curious, adopt open and an inquiring mindset. And as far as people, go out of your way to make connections. Be clear, establish a compelling vision which is clear to all. Invest in promoting values while connecting with people. We'll just quickly see these three as to how the pandemic has helped or brought these into focus. Be courageous. During a crisis, leaders relied on the willingness to embrace uncertainty and trust people to respond to the government's call of stay at home and save lives. Leaders have demonstrated trust and a willingness to distribute leadership and find alternative solutions. For example, asking communities to support one another, particularly the vulnerable sections. Be curious. Leading when many elements were unknown required a questioning and inquiring mindset. In hospitals, the medicos demonstrated deep curiosity in seeking alternatives to mechanical ventilation for patients and generated ideas for alternative treatment. With the courage to test and implement something new far faster than in normal times, innovations were introduced, such as testing and production of vaccines themselves. Be clear. A key public act of leaders is the messaging, communication, and in the case of this pandemic, clear instructions for citizens and institutions. Jacinda Ardern has been lauded for a clear and compassionate announcement of active alert level 4 and a request to all to please be strong, be kind, and unite against COVID-19. Such a uniting voice is an important feature of leaders. Whilst they may not have all the answers, they catalyze people to act on a common problem and inspiring confidence that together people have the ability to achieve a common goal. Cultivating good leadership during the pandemic. The pandemic has intensified the challenges and increased the responsibility of a leader to build a stronger employee experience that meets changing expectations. It has never been more crucial than now to mentor and support your workforce, being empathetic towards employees, introducing employee-friendly policies, and adapting to new models of operation are important factors for current leaders. Leading organizations through change. Change can be daunting for anyone. Restricted access to workplace has forced employees to work remotely. Employees have faced several issues working remotely, also, such as lack of IT services, infrastructure at home, being on call for up to 16 to 18 hours a day at times, and also no clear division between office and home times. It has also been a challenge for human resource leaders to keep their employees productive, efficient, and engaged. This has urged many leaders to create long-term remote working strategy for the years ahead. For the coming years also, they've announced work from home. For leaders to be effective, they need to be agile, move fast, make decisions swiftly, and be aware of changing business needs. Agile, be fast, and be willing to change. It is also necessary to communicate with peers, starting from junior to senior levels, to offer reassurance and keep them motivated and informed. Through all of this are the requirements of leading virtually, which is different from leading in person. They also need to lead a collaborative virtual workforce by helping employees build discipline and structure around these new ways of working. Even working from home or working virtually requires the people to be disciplined in their own order. Leading virtually is not a skill that all leaders have, but yes, can be developed. Opportunities opened by COVID-19. Despite the challenges, the crisis has opened many exciting opportunities, such as accelerating digital transformation, serving new customers and markets, making organization more purpose-driven, much further than just profit, purpose-driven, larger purposes, implementing new models for working, reimagining the workplace. Probably the large brick and mortar campuses may not be in vogue for too long now. COVID-19 will also force organizations to think differently about their leadership development strategies, which capabilities are required, and what's the best way to develop these. In this pandemic, what can leaders do to support employees with policies and welfare programs? A leader plays a great role in supporting an employee's career development through regular training and mentoring programs. It adds to higher retention value, especially in crises. It is essential to invest in the continued training of your employees to improve their performance and for future prospects, especially in areas of digital learning and soft skills, because they are the future leaders. Frequent informal virtual meetups help in improving workplace engagement and creating a healthy environment. With increased social isolation being a new normal, the pandemic has taken a toll on employees' mental health, often leaving them unmotivated and distressed. Counseling sessions to help support employees' mental wellness could be offered. Leaders should also support by giving employees flexibility to take care of their families too. Regular check-ins by seniors can also be helpful in giving them much wanted reassurance. Seniors, talking to them, visiting them. Leaders should also relook past policies, give it a relook, consider support for vaccination. Many organizations are doing that, and also consider increasing the limit on mobile and internet reimbursements, as employees would be using these facilities and services much more during this challenging time, and many such other issues that leaders could do for their employees. What do countries with the best coronavirus responses have in common? Any guesses? Women leaders. The leaders of Germany, Taiwan, New Zealand, Iceland, Finland, Norway, and Denmark. They have been reported to having done very well. And these female leaders in these countries, so we are discussing, are female leaders more successful in managing COVID-19? It has been often reported that female leaders in these countries are managing the crisis better than their male counterparts. Resilience, pragmatism, benevolence, trust in collective common sense, mutual aid, and humility are mentioned as common features for the success of these women leaders. Greater involvement of women results in a broader perspective, offering richer and more complete solutions. Broader perspective. These countries that are led by women and have been more effective rank high on the gender parity list. This is a list of countries where in those countries, the number of male and female very high executives is high. So where the gender parity exists. So this is a gender parity list. These same countries also rank high on having women on corporate boards. It indicates that egalitarian societies, that is societies that pursue and give importance to equality, are better managed. Here, power is enhanced by the complementary nature of both genders contributing. Leadership here is driven by supposed feminine qualities such as empathy, compassion, listening, and collaboration, distinct from traditional managerial, supervisory, and controlling processes that we are commonly used to. It implies that gender-balanced environments produce more robust decisions. Gender-balanced environments. Major studies have also found outcomes to be systemically better in countries led by women. A key factor identified is that female-led countries locked down earlier. This could be because women leaders are more risk-averse than male counterparts. Also, decisive and clear communication and participative leadership styles could have played a major role. It is true that not all countries led by women have had low death rates, but there does seem to be a valuable leadership lesson here that empathy, warmth, and transparency are important in such times, just difficult times of the pandemic, whomever they may come from. Leadership will never be the same post-COVID. Future leaders need to focus on 3 pillars of specific skills and capabilities. The first is leading through uncertainty, also called the sense-making pillar, being able to make sense of what is happening in the very ambiguous situation of confusion. Leaders who are not bothered by ambiguity can process new information and rapidly adapt with the changing dynamics when the dynamics are changing. They are able to make decisions in a world of unknowns. Leaders must develop a growth mindset, removing models that are no longer relevant. By becoming comfortable with the idea that they are not always going to have clear answers. They need to cultivate trust. This is also called the connecting or the engaging pillar, connecting with others. Leaders need to create an emotional and relational foundation to connect with and engage with employees, creating a climate of purpose and belonging that connects their work to the larger purpose, not just profit, larger purpose of the organization and social good. Leaders need to value differences. Employees want organizations to leverage their uniqueness, especially when they have come from diverse backgrounds. Obviously, they are much richer in their views, a broader variety of views. So employees want organizations to leverage their uniqueness. Connecting to purpose and valuing differences, leaders cultivate trust and demonstrate empathy and authenticity. And reskilling for opportunity. This is the business building pillar, focuses on propelling the organization into the future. Leaders need to be forward thinking about the business and talent, creating a culture of psychological safety, curiosity, and experimentation, where teams naturally engage in innovation processes. Many issues of the pandemic are heavily dependent on technology, data, and analytics. It is essential for leaders to become conversant with these digital trends and create new business models. And now coming on to the leadership lessons learned during the pandemic. how underprepared were we as a country to deal with such a crisis? Building strong relationships with key stakeholders, developing effective local supply chains and other processes. Key questions to ask: how do we ensure that we maximally prepare for such threats? What are the tools? What are the systems that should be in place? The answers will be unique for each individual scenario, but the exercise has to be undertaken proactively, the basic principles remaining the same. Every leader should find the most effective style of leading employees that suits them and their organizational needs. Having a professional and compassionate leader possessing the necessary skill set to manage and lead organizations plays a huge role to ensure its success and growth, especially in such turbulent times. COVID-19 has provided us with many lessons in crisis management. Many of the most successful leaders and companies have demonstrated strong people skills, very important, which over a period of time was getting diluted. Pivoting their organization by supporting employees, looking after them, supporting them, meeting their queries, or their welfare, etc. Listening to what the customers want. Leadership is extremely lonely at the top, especially so in difficult times. Successful leaders know that during turbulent times, it is critical to understand the nature of the crisis, communicate clearly and often, be empathetic, and act swiftly and decisively. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I've come to the end of my talk presentation. I thank you for your very patient hearing, and I'm now open to questions, and it shall be a pleasure to take them on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. That was a lot of valuable insight from you. Sir, I have a few questions from the participants here. The first question I'll take from Ratnesh Desai. Ratnesh actually is asking, how important is communication in changing public opinion or notions and the behavior in general? Could Jacinda Ardern have displayed such an outstanding success story if the citizens by themselves did not believe in masks, vaccines, and the social distancing norms, just like in India?
Now, it's a very interesting question. If the people were not with her, would she have achieved the same amount of success? I think that is what the question leads to. Yes, that is where leadership comes in. That is where leadership comes in, where with your confidence and with your reassurance and with your capability, which you have proven earlier also probably and hopefully, so you are able to change the mindset for them to think in the correct manner. That is leadership, and that is what counts. And that is why probably she is the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Though yes, there are many other national leaders, as we spoke about, who have not handled the pandemic well, but yes, she comes out as one of the bright stars in this pandemic, and yes, a true leader. So it is all about leadership, how you put across your point, how you make them understand through your behavior. You saw a photograph which I put of her hugging another lady with a hijab. No, that was a photograph of after the Christchurch bombings. She went out of her way to show that she cares. And when the public understands this, I'm sure they'll all fall in line. Thank you.
Right. Lovely, sir. So my next participant is Priya, who has a view actually, and we'd like to hear from you on what you think. So she says that Indian population is divided into different stages, such as the laborers, the mid workers, owners of businesses, and then we have politicians and leaders as well. Now, should not these have been guided stage-wise to get a better flow of managing things in India? And not just blaming the foremost leader for everything, it is the responsibility of every citizen at every stage as well to look forward in ensuring that their families and people around them are learning and they get secure from this pandemic. As you said, division of work amongst its people and leaders can lead to some good work.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you, Priya, for your question. Yes, your question is pertaining to why blame only the politician or the leader. No, why shouldn't the others, the citizens, also take care themselves? Your question, as I understand, is leading towards that. Well, yes, you are right. I mean, as citizens, educated citizens, well-informed citizens, we should take care of these issues, and we are intelligent enough to know that. You've also mentioned about laborers who may not be that intellectually aware of these issues. Yes, we have a wide variety of all sections in our population, and that is where it becomes all the more important for the leader. No, he is the leader. He or she is the leader. No, while yes, everybody needs to be themselves individually also correct in their thinking and in their doing, but then why should we have a leader? We have a leader so that he can show direction. He can show clear direction to everybody that this is what needs to be done. Many have done it very well. Some have not done it so well, and some have done it in a very drastic manner on the wrong side. So that is the role of leadership. No, and leadership, that is one very important definition of leadership. The role of leadership is to develop more leaders. No, it is pertinent to your question that why don't we all ourselves, the various sections of our society, develop ourselves into meaningful leaders ourselves? Yes, that is one role of the leadership. Rather than exploiting, in many countries, it is more of exploiting the downtrodden and the ones with lesser means. Rather, we need to get all of them up. So that is the ideal situation, and probably everybody will lead to that. So while it is the responsibility of every individual section, an individual person, an individual citizen to do his bit or her bit, the leader still assumes a lot of importance. And because he or she lays down a large number of policies also that affect the others. And that is why in one of the slides I would have shown that they were given that Ig Nobel award for showing to the world that politicians or leaders can be more deadly than scientists and doctors to a certain extent. So it could go either way. It could go either way. So yes, that is where the importance of good leadership comes in, and which is what we are discussing today. I hope I've answered your question to a certain extent, Priya.
Lovely, sir. Right. So I have Ratnesh again, and he has rightly pointed out to the question towards communication and soft skills. So how important, he's asking, how important is soft skills or communication in changing public opinion, notions, and behavior? And he has, of course, added to it that could Jacinda Ardern have displayed this outstanding success stories if the citizens did not believe in what was necessary for them to do?
I think that is, wasn't this the same question he asked earlier?
Yeah, it is more about the communication and soft skills.
Yeah. No, I come back to what I had said earlier. To be a leader, communication, which is a soft skill, I'm sure we all understand what is the difference between soft skills and hard skills. And the communication is a soft skill. And it is very important for a leader to be able to communicate. And to explicitly spell out what you are meaning by what you want the public to do, what you are going to do, what is in your mind, you share. And that is what I covered in these some of my slides. She came out as very caring, very comforting, and very empathetic. So she was able to communicate. Now communicating is not just by speech. It is with your body language also, by your gestures. We've learned all this in soft skills. So communication is not just speech. So all this put together, do you actually walk the talk? What you are talking, are you actually doing that? That is communicating. You're saying something but doing something else, which is different. So all these things probably she did all that. And from all the videos that one sees and all the articles that are available on how she succeeded, all these things come out quite clearly that her communication, which is not just verbal communication, but overall a fulsome communication, was very effective, especially in getting people together and making them realize that they all together, even though the answers are not known to very many things because of the ambiguous situation, they can still pull on and get out of this successfully, which I try to highlight in some of these slides. Thank you, Mr. Ratnesh.
Thank you so much, sir. Right. Barsha Gupta is asking how would we know if our decision is right or it is wrong? Because there will always be a party which will stand in strong support for us. And then, of course, we will also have people who would not support the decisions.
What was the name of the question? The person asking this question, please, once again.
Barsha Gupta.
Raksha Gupta. Okay, difficult to pronounce your first name, but I suppose Miss Gupta. Yeah, there will always be people. There will always be people who will question what the leader is doing, what the leader is saying, the opinions of the leader. And they should be. There should be people to question, and advocate something else that leads to better understanding. That is why you have an opposition in the government, and that opposition needs to be strong. Not like what's happening presently, but that is why people in a democracy, people need to question what's happening. So it's good, it's healthy. A healthy discussion always leads to better decisions. For us, in a small way, we have seen that one issue that I highlighted, why are women leaders in this condition in some countries are considered to be better than the male counterparts. Probably they put there in those countries, the plus point is that together with the brains or the thinking thought process of both the women leaders and the male leaders put together, they came up with good solutions. That was highlighted in that slide. So there will always be dissension, which should be there. It is up to the leader. Now, if the leader is clear and confident of what he or she is doing, what she or he is saying, he will have the capability to slowly turn over the dissenting voice also, or voices also, to follow his line. He will show the direction. He or she will show the direction very clearly through, again, walking the talk. And if the decisions are based on ethics, morality, the key concepts, character concepts, which it should be based, and I'm sure it would have been based, then everybody will fall in line. So as a leader, the first thing that you've got to do, improve your inner portion, your character ethics. What we are talking about, communication, personality, these are the outer portion. It is very wrong to have a good personality with low integrity, honesty, which are your interior ethics, character ethics. If you have strong character ethics, your personality will automatically become strong. And if your decisions are based on those inner ethical qualities, then with the strength of that behind you, you will be able to slowly turn around all the dissenting voices. I hope I've been able to make this point clear. Very important for especially young budding leaders. My advice with my experience is, don't get carried away by outside issues. Strengthen your inwards, strengthen yourself inwards with your character qualities. Outside issues will fall into line themselves with your confidence, with your competence, and with your character ethics. Thank you.
That's quite deep, sir. That's amazing for the young leaders to actually follow from you. I have a question from Jay, and Jay actually is asking, what according to you is or are the major factors that are responsible for the great failures, such as the mass vaccination drive that is happening in India? How would you actually suggest views on it, and would what would have been better or a systematic way in your perspective to carry this out?
Okay, Jay, you asked more of a technical question of the problems of the vaccination drive being faced with, and how would one manage it? Okay, so I wish I was in a position to also get it done and get it implemented. But there are many issues. No, it is, first of all, it is a very complicated issue. It is a complicated issue. And that's why leaders who have the capability are there in the places where they are. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. It has things like making the public informed, keeping the public informed as to know the importance of vaccination. As you have said, many sections of society are not coming forward, and many countries, they are being lured into come, and they're being given gifts to come forward to get vaccinated. We read about it every time in the papers, and some of our relatives and all also are there in those countries. So education is the first thing, no, to make it success. Even you may have all the wherewithal, but if the people are not coming, then what is the use of that wherewithal? You may have the vaccines, you may have the doctors, you may have the clinics, you may have everything, but if the people are not coming in, then what do you do? So education is one, no, and that is where the leader comes in. And as I've quoted that in incident of New Zealand, where they brought in those technical experts, those health experts, to demystify science to the citizens of New Zealand. And also they were the go-to experts for all queries that the citizens may have. No, so use these health experts, the scientists, etc. Our country is also doing that. We are doing that. But still, especially in the lower sections of society, that still hesitation is still there to get vaccinated or not. And some very learned people are also avoiding it. So first is education. Second, of course, you got to have the wherewithal. That is the vaccines. First of all, you got to have the vaccines. And yes, there was an issue of priority, which at the critical time there were very few vaccines in India. And much of it was given to other countries for various reasons. So I'm sure the leaders would have had their own reasons for having done that, and for probably meeting the promises that they have made to others, and diplomacy, etc., many other high thinking issues. So education and wherewithal, and then having a system to put them both together. And we have Covaxin, the app, etc., which is very effective. I myself have been now totally vaccinated, and it's very simple and effective. So all this actually goes down to education to the lowest level, to the lowest level, to the people in the villages and in the wards, etc., and how well the volunteers are able to motivate these people to come forward in a disciplined manner to get themselves vaccinated and make sure that the vaccines are there. Nowadays also we have people going to these vaccination centers, but the vaccines are not there, and they come back and they go them time and again, which is wrong. So all this needs to be put into place. I hope I've been able to answer your question to a certain extent, Jay.
Thank you so much, sir. I'll take another question from Varsha. And Varsha is asking, how can a leader gather all the relevant information for the correct decision making? As there could be too many or many sources that are available to pick up the information from. So how do we know if the source of information that we're taking is genuine or correct?
Yeah, Varsha, interesting question. Are leaders born or made? It refers to that. Leaders in India, at least, are made. They're not born, other than probably the Gandhi family, and we know what's happening there. So now, how do the leaders become leaders? How can you call them leaders? You don't get born as a leader, especially in India nowadays, at least. So how do you become a leader? You grow as a leader. You want to become a leader. You train yourself to become a leader. So while training, you are able to develop those qualities which will enable you to understand what are the nuances of each issue. That is important. What are the important issues? What are the important aspects of each issue? You got to have an understanding, a knowledge of that. Now that could come naturally to you. It could come naturally to you. It could also come through various leadership capsules and training models and things like that. But that depends upon your mindset. Do you have an open mind to listen to everybody? As I've highlighted in the presentation, leadership involves listening to your broader workforce, getting more opinions. Don't shut yourself away from everything else. The moment you shut yourself, you're losing out on inputs. This is what even my experience in the army has taught me, that listen. Let everybody talk. Let them talk rubbish. There may be some good in it. And then you as a leader with your inputs decide. You may overrule everybody, but then that is because you are the leader. You have got more IQ and EQ, which is more important than IQ. Emotional quotient intelligence, more important than just IQ. You have EQ also with you, and that is why you are there at that position of a leader. And we must understand, how is a leader formed? A leader comes out from the same group. In a democracy, even a respected prime minister now came out from the group, as a citizen. So a group propels the leader. A situation, it's a triangle: situation, group, and leader. The group in which situation it is propels the leader. In a different situation, a similar group will propel a different leader. Winston Churchill was the leader of United Kingdom during the Second World War, but he was not elected as the prime minister after the war. They did not want him there. They wanted somebody else. The situation had changed. So what I'm trying to get at is that, how do you get all these inputs? That's your question. You got to develop that habit. You got to keep an eye and ear to be able to understand what's happening and imbibe or make use of those important issues. That is leadership. That is leadership. Your competence, it will come if at your age and background, I suppose. Start developing it now. When you get into the little higher ranks, middle rung, or little less than middle rung also, if you start doing it now, it will all come to you automatically, provided you make an effort. And as I said, a leader is not just put there. So it no longer happens. It no longer happens, or it may happen by default. But a leader is made to go up to that. He's made a leader only when people know that so-and-so has got the competence to be a leader. Okay, I hope Varsha have been able to answer your question.
Well, so that was lovely, actually. So I have another question from Priya, and it's an interesting one. I believe a lot of us have actually faced this issue. So what Priya is asking is that our company has given us work from home, and as an employee, we are having a hard time and good time both moving ahead in that direction with work. With work from home, actually. So would virtual leadership be a better option?
Yeah, so I would like to ask Priya herself, would she like to continue working from home throughout, or also go to office and meet other people? No, let us ask ourselves, are we happy working from home, enjoying, as the question has said, both enjoying it also? But at times, we will miss the physical interaction. Leading virtually is, I think, forced upon us during this pandemic. I, for one, would certainly like to go out and meet everybody, get to know them, get to know their characteristics. What are the good points that can help me if I'm the leader? What are their good points that can help me? Which are the points which I need to keep in mind that they are not so good at? Keep in mind while I'm probably distributing work or distributing responsibilities, and also bring it and help them improve those points. See? So leadership, as I said, one of the main roles of leadership is to develop more leaders for the future. Then you are a leader. If you think that you are only the leader and everybody else is only subordinates, then you're wrong. Tomorrow you're gone. The others are going to lead. So you've got to no, I would certainly like to go out, meet everybody, and talk to them and get to know them better and lead them physically. And I'm sure that is what will happen in due course of time. I think work from home is a issue which is more related to this pandemic only. And I suppose, yes, it will continue. It will continue. It is another form of working, especially for people who are finding it difficult to go to work. But I'm sure it will open up again. Normalcy will come in again, and we will again enjoy being outside home and mixing around with everybody, and also enjoying it and doing better work. Better work. So Priya, be prepared to work from in the real world also, and not just virtually.
Lovely, sir. Thank you so much. There's another interesting one from Manish Pandey. And Manish actually was asking, sir, is communication the only way for the leaders to achieve any goal? And what are the other major pillars for effective leadership?
Yeah, this is the question, that what are the leadership traits? What are the qualities of a leader? Leadership traits can run into many figures. It starts with, let us say, okay, first, the main issue I will highlight again, the main issue is your inner qualities. Your main issue is inner qualities. People who have, students who have not read that book, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You must read this book. I think it's by Stephen Cohen, if I remember correct. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And you must read that. It very nicely explains what he means by character ethics and personality ethics. So the core, the mudda, as we say, the fundas or the fundamental issue is character ethics, integrity, honesty, dependability, reliability, all that. So that is one. That is the main issue, and the other issues are also the physique, personality, your dressing sense, your etiquettes, your manners. This is all part of communication. You could call it part of communication. This is your outer self. And unless your inner self is not strong, your outer self will not be beautiful. So there are many traits that are listed, but I would say concentrate at this young age. Concentrate, reinforce at each and every stage your character qualities, build them up. Then nothing can shake in you, and everything that comes out from you will be excellent and beautiful.
Right, thank you so much. So I think the next question, with your experience in the Army Corps, would actually help you answer this question. It's by Vishnu N. Kumar, and he's asking, so how important is the chain of command? And how would you as a leader keep and follow up on, or how would you as a leader would keep and follow up on the commands? What are the repercussions if the leader fails to follow up?
Yeah, interesting question, Vishnu. Are you from an army background? I don't know. But yeah, chain of command is otherwise a difficult issue to understand, but it's nice that you've asked this question. Change of command. Now, who's the commander? You and me. Normal human beings. With your competence, with your capabilities, you have grown up the ladder and come into that commanding position. Now, let us take the position of a commanding officer. Commanding officer who's commanding a unit of about 1,000 troops, with officers and other juniors. Now, the question is, how would you instill this sort of a protocol of command in chain? You see, the issue is you've got to respect whom you're commanding. You're commanding because of them. If those people were not there, the subordinates were not there, you are nobody. You've got to respect those who are commanding. Now, as Mr. Sohail has asked, from my personal example, okay. When I was a commanding officer in my unit, I obviously had a secretariat, a personal assistant and things like that. And my instructions to that person were, whoever comes to meet me, whether he is the lowest Jawan or the second in command, just next to me, my deputy. And if I'm busy on something, talking to somebody or other, you will tell me on my intercom, whoever has come, that so and so has come, sir. And I will tell you whether he should wait, whether he should come in, or I will call him back. My clear instructions to him were that, so that that chain of command is broken. That person who has come to meet me knows that, yes, I've got the ear of the commanding officer now. Commanding officer has known that I've come. He must be very busy. That's why he's not letting me come in. But if he knows what I've come for, and I'm sure I know what he's come for, because I've been handling that case. And if it was urgent, I would have called him in, even if I'm doing something else. So what I'm trying to say, don't strictly go by chain of command. Use change of command to help you. It should not become a hindrance to you. No, you understand that point? You help. Yes, you have a chain of command because it helps in segregating and also unwanted people at unwanted times. But then use it to your advantage, that you still get to know, because that person may be having a very important issue. But if my PA says ki nahi, saab ko nahi mil sakta, you cannot meet the boss. PA does not know what he's come for. I know what he's come for, because I am the commanding officer. I have done my job. I know what he's come for, so and so has come for. And if I feel, yes, it's very important to me and to the other person, I would call him right in. Even if I'm sitting with somebody else and doing something else very important, I would say, okay, let's take a break. I want to talk to so and so. So again, I'm just repeating myself. Use chain of command to your as a force multiplier. Use it in a meaningful manner. Don't let it be a hindrance, an obstacle. Okay, I hope I've been able to answer you, Vishnu.
Thank you so much, sir. I'll take two last questions, one from Pooja and the other from Alberto Zika. The first one from Pooja is, hello, sir. How would you keep your team motivated and have a long-term commitment from your team despite the conflicts and obstacles that constantly keep arising? During the crisis, a lot of team members start to doubt the leadership or maybe lack in motivation to continue. How do you overcome this challenge?
Yeah, motivating the subordinates in difficult situations. That is what the question is by Pooja. Okay, I thought I'd covered this to a large extent in my presentation. And one issue certainly is communication. Communicate, and what my last slide also said, communicate effectively and often. Communicate effectively and often. Keep talking, keep talking. Now we have a system in the army, those of us who may be having an army background, of what we call a monthly Sainik Sammelan, where the commanding officer talks to his 1,000 people. They're all sitting in front of him and he talks every month. And before that, points are taken from the individuals. That are there any points that you want that the commanding officer should cover or answer in the Sainik Sammelan. So these issues of communication, it's basically communication, and these times are used by a sensible and a good meaning commanding officer. All of them are good meaning. To first of all give shabash to the people who have done a very good job, because they are your hands and limbs in any case. You're only the head. Give a shabash to them. Tell them what is going to happen again, what is coming up next for them, so that they are mentally prepared. How you as a commanding officer see them, see those activities coming up. Okay, what is happening? You're communicating with them. You're communicating effectively. You're communicating often. And if something is required more urgently, you have a special Sainik Sammelan. Things like that. So these issues, you see, you got to find opportunities to communicate. I would put it that way. Communication is the most important to motivate. And yes, the second issue is you walk your talk. You do what you be seen. You be seen doing what you are saying. It's not that you say something and do something else. For example, you tell somebody, okay, not to smoke, but you yourself are still smoking. Very, 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 very small example, but things like that. You walk the talk also. And So you got to communicate more and more often, find opportunities to communicate, and there need to be good reasons. You just can't communicate unnecessarily. Yes, move around with the people, know what is troubling them, and you should have the ear to the ground. We call it ear to the ground. You should know what the workers are doing. Even in an organization, you got to have your ear to the ground. What is happening, so that you get the input. No, you don't have to have spies going all over. No, that means you're not a leader at all. If you yourself, when you go around, talk to everybody, you get inputs. You get inputs what's worrying them. And that is why one of my slides was, how can we improve the welfare of employees in such difficult situations? So you get to know, you talk to them, you get to know what's worrying them, and you take decisions, you take action to overcome those worries and the other issues that they may have. So communicating with them and getting to know them will keep them motivated. And that's how you want for them to deliver. They're doing your job. They're doing your production. They're doing your job. It's your job to look after them. It's two-way traffic. I hope, Pooja, this satisfies or answers your questions to a large extent.
Thank you so much, sir. The last question is from Alberto. He's asking if the board of directors of big and successful companies realize that the company will face major losses due to reduction in sales during the period of the pandemic, however long the period might be. Otherwise, the company may, which has enough money to keep running. So should the board of directors actually decide to close the company down to last the pandemic, or should he some way or the other keep it running?
Yeah, it is a situation that most companies are facing, especially the smaller companies. The larger companies have got a larger financial cushion, I would say, which sees them through these difficult times. The smaller companies are closing down and they are not able to manage their workforce, etc. But then this depends upon the company itself, and also where the leader comes in. Is he able to redirect? Like for example, I had one point in my slides that retooling what you're producing, retooling that if possible to what is selling, hand sanitizers, PPEs, masks. Many people have started doing that, and they're making money from that for the time being, and till the time they get back, when these things are no longer required, and hopefully they should not be required after another 6, 7, 8 months. So then you get back to your normal job or original job. But to generate the profits at this point of time, you got to have the foresight to see what you can do to make the best of this situation. The easiest is to close down. Hold your head and say, oh, what happened, and close down. But that is not what a good leader would do. The leader thinks and and sees what is happening. Changing environment. What are people wanting? Can I help them in those issues? People have done that. People have gained much more due to the pandemic. One is education, online education, what we are doing now. So these things are there. It depends upon, that is where the leadership comes in. And chairman of the board of directors, I suppose, is the leader itself. So the board of directors also need to be led by this leader accordingly, that let's do this. So be aware of what's happening outside, be eager to know, and know your own strengths. And the word is to use those strengths to overcome the difficult situation. Retool yourself, change yourself. Change is very difficult, we have seen, but the only constant is change. You should be able to change. That is what we mean by agile leadership. If I covered once or twice in the presentation, leadership needs to be, I said, horizontal, have many leaders, as well as agile. Think quickly and be ready to change. That is what is agile. You are agile, agility. Rather than being too fat, you're not able to move around. You need to be agile. So an agile leadership will be able to still take the company out of doldrums into a very successful company. Yeah, Alberto, I hope I've answered your question.
So lovely. Thank you so much. So with this, thank you so much for your insight and, of course, the valuable knowledge that you've shared with us. I would now like to call upon Professor Sandeep Singh to give the vote of thanks in this session.
Thank you so much, Professor Sohail, sir. It's my privilege to propose the vote of thanks on the DPU Brainwave series. I am Professor Sandeep Singh on behalf of Dr. D.Y. Patil Vidyapeeth, Center for Online Learning, and the entire team extends the vote of thanks to Major General Dr. Amar Krishna for gracing your thoughts and incite us with your words of wisdom on the most important topic, leadership in turbulent COVID pandemic times. We have gone through a lot of examples of inadequate leadership during this pandemic, and that again leads to the disaster as well. And we have also gone through some good leadership examples which can save humanity and lives in this current situation. Thanks a lot for giving us the detailed insight about the topic, sir. I would like to extend my thanks to our respected Executive Director, Trustee, Dr. Smita Jadhav, ma'am, respected Director, Dr. Safia Farooqi, ma'am, my dear learners, faculty members, and the participants of the webinar. Thank you so much for giving your precious time. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. And with this, I'll declare the session as closed.